Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey into ancient Greece, where the marble halls of Mount Olympus echoed with whispered secrets and quiet domestic tensions. Tonight, we'll discover the surprisingly ordinary morning routines that followed the gods' most scandalous affairs, betrayals, and divine punishments. Whether you're settling into bed or already drifting toward deep sleep, I'm grateful you're here to explore these intimate corners of immortal domesticity with me. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps from a bedroom where you've experienced your own quiet moments of relationship complexity. It's a lovely thought, all of us finding our way to deep sleep through these deeply human stories from the realm of immortal beings. The daily rituals of Mount Olympus, morning routines of the immortals. As the first pale light of dawn touched the marble columns of Zeus's palace, Hera was already awake in her separate bedchamber, methodically brushing her hair while contemplating the scent of unfamiliar perfume that had lingered on her husband's robes the previous evening. The morning routine on Mount Olympus began, as it had for countless millennia, with the careful navigation of divine relationships strained by infidelity, jealousy, and the complex emotional aftermath of immortal passions. Hera's private chambers had been designed specifically to provide refuge from the constant reminders of Zeus's wandering attention, their Eastern orientation, ensuring that she could begin each day with solitude and the soft comfort of sunrise light filtering through curtains woven from crystallized morning mist. Her dressing table, carved from a single piece of celestial marble that seemed to glow with its own inner light, held the implements of her daily grooming ritual, but also served as a place for quiet contemplation of the domestic tensions that had become as routine as breathing in the divine household. The hairbrush in her hands, crafted from the horn of a unicorn that had lived for 10,000 years, moved through her dark tresses with mechanical precision, while her thoughts dwelled on the subtle signs of Zeus's latest romantic entanglement. The scent had been jasmine and myrrh, an expensive combination favoured by mortal princesses who caught the king of gods' wandering eye. Hera had learned to identify these fragrances over the centuries, each one telling its own story of divine infidelity and mortal consequences. The jasmine suggested someone young, probably royal, while the myrrh indicated ceremonial preparations, perhaps a wedding that Zeus had attended in his divine capacity, only to be distracted by a beautiful bride or attending maiden. Each stroke of the brush through her hair followed the same pattern she had established centuries ago when Zeus's first major affair had shattered her initial naive assumptions about divine marriage. 100 strokes, counted silently while she processed the emotional reality of sharing her immortal husband with an endless parade of mortal women who caught his fancy. The rhythm provided structure to thoughts that might otherwise spiral into the kind of rage that had once prompted her to transform lovers into various animals or curse them with elaborate punishments. The morning light gradually strengthened as Apollo began his daily journey across the sky, but the illumination only served to highlight the careful way Hera had arranged her chambers to minimize reminders of her marital situation. No wedding gifts from Zeus were visible, no symbols of their divine union that might mock her with their promises of eternal fidelity. Instead, she had surrounded herself with objects that celebrated her independent divine authority. The peacock feathers that symbolized her watchful nature, the pomegranates that represented her fertility powers separate from any male influence, the golden crown that marked her as Queen of Olympus in her own right. In the chamber adjacent to hers, separated by walls thick enough to muffle even divine conversations, Zeus was conducting his own morning routine with the careful attention of someone who had learned to manage multiple relationships across centuries of practice. His private washroom was equipped with multiple basins for different types of cleansing, one for removing the scent of mortal perfumes, another for washing away the traces of divine energy left by passionate encounters, and a third containing water blessed by the river Lethe for cleansing memories that might prove inconvenient during breakfast conversations with his wife. The process of preparing for another day of managing divine domestic tensions required Zeus to carefully review the previous evening's activities and their potential consequences. Had he been seen returning late to Olympus? Were there any witnesses to his transformation into animal form for the purpose of romantic pursuit? Did any of the other gods know about his most recent liaison, and might they feel obligated to inform Hera out of loyalty or mischief? His reflection in the bronze mirror showed the face of a god who had perfected the art of appearing innocently divine while harbouring secrets that would devastate his marriage if fully revealed. The beard oil he worked through his silver whiskers had been specially formulated to neutralise foreign scents, while leaving his natural divine fragrance intact. Each strand of facial hair received individual attention, not from vanity, but from necessity. Hera's supernatural perception could detect the slightest inconsistency in his appearance or aroma. The selection of his morning chiton required similar careful consideration. The white wool that had been his standard choice for centuries now seemed too pristine, potentially arousing suspicion about why he felt the need to appear particularly innocent. The deep blue garment might remind Hera of the ocean where he had recently pursued a sea nymph. The golden robe could suggest connections to wealth and luxury that might hint at gifts given to mortal lovers. Finally, he settled on a simple grey chiton that suggested nothing more interesting than administrative duties and divine bureaucracy. 3 chambers away, Athena was beginning her own morning routine in a space carefully organised to reflect her role as goddess of wisdom and strategic thinking. Her library bedroom contained not only the scrolls and tablets associated with her scholarly pursuits, but also detailed records of divine relationships and their consequences that she maintained as part of her broader study of immortal behaviour patterns. The systematic documentation of affairs, betrayals and punishments had become one of her most fascinating research projects, revealing patterns of divine psychology that might otherwise go unnoticed. Her morning reading always began with updates from her network of owl messengers, who observed and reported on the nocturnal activities of various Olympian deities. The previous night's reports painted a familiar picture of divine romantic complications. Aphrodite had been seen in secretive conversation with Ares near the rose gardens. Poseidon had made another visit to his underwater palace with a mortal companion, and Apollo had spent considerable time composing music that suggested romantic inspiration from an earthly source. The methodical review of these intelligence reports provided Athena with the information she needed to navigate the complex social dynamics that would unfold during the day's communal activities. Knowing who was involved with whom, who had been betrayed, and who was plotting revenge allowed her to position herself advantageously in conversations while avoiding the explosive emotional conflicts that regularly erupted among her fellow deities. Her grey chiton was selected not just for its practicality during scholarly work, but for its diplomatic neutrality in a household where clothing colours might be interpreted as statements of allegiance in ongoing romantic conflicts. The simple leather sandals she chose were designed for quick movement, useful when divine arguments escalated to the point where strategic retreat became necessary. Even her hair, braided with silver ribbons that enhanced her intellectual authority, was arranged to project competence and reliability rather than romantic appeal. In the tower that housed her private chambers, Artemis was completing her own morning preparations with the efficient movements of someone whose life had been deliberately structured to avoid the romantic complications that plagued her fellow deities. Her vow of eternal chastity was not just a personal choice, but a strategic decision to maintain independence in a divine realm where relationships inevitably became entangled with politics, power struggles, and elaborate revenge schemes. Her silver bow received its daily maintenance with the kind of attention that other goddesses devoted to their appearance, each component carefully inspected, cleaned, and adjusted to maintain perfect functionality. The weapon served not only as a tool for her hunting responsibilities, but as a symbol of her autonomy in a culture where female deities were often defined by their relationships with male partners. The ritual of bow care provided meditative focus, while she listened to the sounds of domestic tension echoing through the palace walls. From Zeus's chambers came the careful sounds of someone trying to move quietly, while managing the logistics of concealing evidence. The soft splash of water suggested thorough washing, while the rustle of fabric indicated multiple clothing changes as he searched for the perfect appearance of innocent divine authority. The faint scent of cleansing herbs drifted through the corridors, confirming Artemis's assessment that the king of gods was once again engaged in the elaborate morning routine that followed his romantic adventures. Hera's chambers contributed their own sounds to the morning symphony of divine domesticity, the steady rhythm of hair brushing, the soft clink of jewellery being selected and arranged, and occasional deep sighs that suggested the emotional weight of managing a marriage to an incorrigibly unfaithful husband. The careful precision of her morning routine had become a form of armour, each perfectly executed task serving as preparation for another day of maintaining dignity while navigating the public humiliation of divine infidelity. In the great kitchen of Olympus, Hestia was beginning the day's food preparation, with extra attention to diplomatic considerations. The domestic goddess had learned over centuries of experience that meals could become battlegrounds when divine relationships were strained, requiring careful attention to seating arrangements, menu selections, and service timing to minimize the potential for explosive confrontations. The preparation of ambrosia took on additional complexity when family tensions were high. Each deity's portion had to be prepared according to their individual preferences, but those preferences often changed based on current romantic situations. Zeus preferred his ambrosia more heavily spiced when he was feeling guilty about something, while Hera's appetite for the divine food diminished in direct proportion to her suspicions about her husband's fidelity. Athena required additional protein in her breakfast when she was managing complicated intelligence about divine relationships, and Artemis needed extra energy during periods when she was serving as a refuge for other goddesses dealing with romantic betrayals. The coordination of breakfast service required Hestia to monitor the emotional temperature of the divine household and adjust her preparations accordingly. When tensions were particularly high, she would prepare individual breakfast trays that could be delivered to private chambers, avoiding the potential disaster of forcing estranged deities to share a meal. On calmer days, she could risk the traditional communal breakfast in the great dining hall, though even then she kept escape routes planned and additional food prepared, in case sudden arguments required rapid dietary adjustments. The kitchen itself reflected the realities of divine domestic life, with multiple preparation areas that could be used simultaneously when different deities required completely separate meals due to ongoing conflicts. Storage areas were carefully organised to prevent ingredients from being contaminated by the emotional residue of divine arguments, while cooking implements were blessed with peaceful enchantments designed to promote calm during food preparation. As the morning light grew stronger and the time for communal breakfast approached, the various divine morning routines began to converge toward the inevitable moment when carefully maintained facades would be tested by close proximity and shared conversation. Each deity had spent the early hours preparing their appearance, attitude, and strategy for navigating another day of complex relationships, hidden resentments, and the constant potential for explosive revelation of secrets that everyone knew but no one discussed directly. The sounds of individual preparation gave way to the more coordinated activities of dressing, final grooming touches, and the psychological preparation required for public performance of divine family unity. Doors began to open and close as deities emerged from their private chambers to begin the day's communal activities, each one carefully composed to project their chosen image while concealing the emotional reality of their actual circumstances. Zeus made his appearance in the corridors with a confident bearing of divine authority, his grey chiton perfectly arranged and his silver beard gleaming with health and innocent divine power. His greeting to passing servants was warm but not overly friendly, his pace measured but not hurried, his overall demeanour suggesting nothing more interesting than routine administrative responsibilities. Only the faint tension around his eyes betrayed the careful effort required to maintain this facade of domestic tranquility. Hera emerged from her chambers with equal attention to her public presentation, her dark hair perfectly arranged, and her royal bearing emphasising her status as Queen of Olympus regardless of any personal marital difficulties. Her mourning jewellery was selected to complement her authority rather than her attractiveness, each piece chosen to remind observers of her independent divine power. The subtle scent of pomegranate that surrounded her served both as a signature fragrance and as a masking agent for any emotional distress that might otherwise be detectable to divine perception. The convergence of their morning routines in the palace corridors created moments of careful choreography as Zeus and Hera navigated their first face-to-face encounter of the day. Their greeting was formal, but not cold, acknowledging their divine partnership while avoiding any intimacy that might prove uncomfortable, given the unspoken tensions between them. The brief conversation about administrative duties and weather management served as a safe topic that allowed them to practice their public interaction before the more challenging environment of communal breakfast. But as they made their way toward the great dining hall where the other gods would be gathering, Hera noticed that Zeus's carefully neutral expression couldn't quite hide a small smile that suggested private satisfaction with something, and she began to wonder what new romantic complication might be brewing beneath the surface of their carefully maintained domestic routine. Ambrosia and nectar, the mundane meals that sustained divine life. The small, satisfied smile that Hera had noticed flickering across Zeus's features as they walked toward the dining hall lingered in her thoughts as they entered the great chamber where breakfast would unfold with all the careful diplomatic complexity of a peace negotiation between warring nations. The morning meal on Mount Olympus had evolved over millennia into an elaborate ritual of social positioning, where seating arrangements, conversation topics, and even the timing of food consumption carried layers of meaning related to the ongoing romantic entanglements that defined divine domestic life. The great dining hall itself had been designed with these social complexities in mind, its acoustics carefully engineered to allow for multiple simultaneous conversations while preventing complete privacy that might enable the planning of romantic conspiracies or revenge schemes. The massive obsidian table could accommodate all 12 major Olympians, plus their various attendants and visiting minor deities, but its circular design ensured that no one could claim positional superiority, while everyone remained visible to everyone else throughout the meal. Hestia had already begun arranging the breakfast service with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to manage divine family meals during centuries of romantic scandals, jealous rages, and elaborate revenge plots. Her understanding of divine relationship dynamics allowed her to predict which deities would require separation, which combinations might result in explosive confrontations, and which seating arrangements might actually facilitate the resolution of ongoing conflicts through carefully orchestrated proximity. The preparation of individual ambrosia portions reflected not only each deity's nutritional needs, but also their current emotional state and relationship status. Zeus's portion was prepared with calming herbs designed to reduce guilt-induced anxiety, while Hera's ambrosia contained ingredients that would help maintain emotional equilibrium despite whatever new provocations the day might bring. The subtle modifications to each serving were invisible to casual observation, but represented Hestia's ongoing effort to prevent breakfast from becoming a battlefield. Apollo was already seated at his customary position, his golden hair catching the morning light in ways that seemed almost calculated to enhance his natural attractiveness. The god of music and poetry had spent considerable time on his appearance this morning, suggesting either a new romantic interest or an ongoing affair that required particular attention to his public image. His lyre rested beside his chair, ready to provide musical distraction if conversations became too heated or uncomfortable for diplomatic management. The soft melody he was humming under his breath carried undertones of romantic satisfaction that confirmed Hera's suspicion that the previous evening had involved more than just his official duties as guide for the sun's daily journey. The tune was new, composed recently enough that its emotional content still reflected fresh inspiration from whatever mortal maiden had captured his divine attention. The musical phrases suggested themes of pursuit, conquest, and the particular satisfaction that came from successful romantic adventures. Artemis entered the dining hall with her usual brisk efficiency, her silver hunting attire and practical sandals providing stark contrast to Apollo's carefully arranged golden beauty. The goddess of the hunt had deliberately chosen her most functional clothing for breakfast, sending a clear message about her lack of interest in the romantic complications that consumed so much of her fellow deities' attention. Her bow remained strapped across her shoulder even during meals, serving as both practical tool and symbolic declaration of independence. Her seating choice reflected strategic thinking about the day's potential conflicts, close enough to Apollo to monitor his romantic situation for intelligence purposes, but positioned to allow quick exit if divine arguments escalated beyond verbal confrontation. The careful distance she maintained from Zeus demonstrated her awareness of Hera's current suspicions while avoiding any appearance of taking sides in marital disputes that might affect her own standing within the divine household. Athena's entrance was timed to coincide with the arrival of other deities, allowing her to observe initial interactions while avoiding the appearance of either early arrival that might suggest anxiety or late arrival that might imply disrespect. Her grey chiton and scholarly accessories projected intellectual authority, while her careful attention to social dynamics revealed the strategic thinking that made her such a valuable ally in navigating divine political complexities. The scroll case she carried contained her morning intelligence reports, but she kept it positioned discreetly to avoid drawing attention to her information-gathering activities. The other deities had learned to expect Athena's well-informed perspectives on divine affairs, but direct acknowledgement of her surveillance network might prove uncomfortable for those whose activities were being monitored and documented. Aphrodite's arrival created the kind of atmospheric disturbance that always accompanied the goddess of love's public appearances. Her natural beauty was enhanced this morning by what appeared to be the satisfied glow of successful romantic activity. Her pink chiton arranged to suggest both elegance and sensuality, without crossing into obvious provocation. The rose perfume that surrounded her carried undertones of masculine scent that suggested intimate contact with someone whose identity remained diplomatically unacknowledged. Her greeting to Ares, who had arrived moments earlier with his own barely concealed signs of romantic satisfaction, was carefully neutral, but carried enough subtle warmth to confirm their ongoing affair while avoiding direct acknowledgement that might force other deities to take official notice of their relationship. The god of war's position at the table had been strategically chosen to provide clear sightlines to Aphrodite, while maintaining appropriate distance from Hephaestus, her officially designated husband. Hephaestus himself appeared to be focused entirely on his breakfast preparations, his attention devoted to the technical aspects of ambrosia consumption, rather than the social dynamics swirling around him. The divine smith's apparent obliviousness to his wife's affair was a carefully maintained fiction that allowed all parties to avoid the formal confrontations that would be required if the adultery were officially acknowledged. His morning greeting to both Aphrodite and Ares was cordial but brief, suggesting awareness combined with deliberate blindness. The actual serving of ambrosia began with Hestia's careful attention to the diplomatic implications of service order and portion presentation. Zeus received his portion first as befitted his position as king of the gods, but Hera's serving followed immediately to acknowledge her status as queen, rather than creating any appearance of diminished authority due to marital tensions. The timing and presentation of each subsequent serving reflected Hestia's understanding of current relationship dynamics and her effort to maintain social equilibrium. The ambrosia itself appeared as a thick, pearl-coloured porridge that shifted subtly between different hues depending on the viewing angle and lighting conditions. Each spoonful contained not only perfect nutrition, but also emotional stabilizers designed to prevent divine temperaments from escalating into destructive conflicts during shared meals. The flavours were complex enough to occupy attention, while remaining sufficiently neutral to avoid triggering memories associated with specific romantic encounters. Zeus's careful attention to his breakfast routine provided cover for discreet observation of the other deities' behaviour and appearance. His centuries of experience managing multiple romantic relationships had taught him to monitor his divine family for signs of suspicious knowledge, romantic intrigue, or potential alliance formation that might threaten his carefully maintained system of compartmentalized affairs. The morning meal offered ideal opportunities for this surveillance under the cover of normal social interaction. Hera's breakfast consumption followed patterns that had evolved over centuries of managing public dignity while processing private emotional turmoil. Each spoonful of ambrosia was consumed with deliberate grace, her posture and expression projecting calm authority, while her actual attention focused on analysing every detail of Zeus's behaviour for clues about his most recent romantic activities. The practiced nature of this performance allowed her to maintain her royal bearing while conducting thorough emotional intelligence gathering. The conversation during breakfast centred on safe topics that allowed for normal social interaction while avoiding subjects that might trigger explosive revelations or uncomfortable admissions. Weather management, mortal affairs requiring divine intervention, and administrative duties provided neutral ground for discussion, while the more interesting undercurrents of romantic tension, jealous suspicion, and carefully concealed guilt played out through subtle glances, strategic silences, and the complex choreography of divine family dynamics. Apollo's contribution to breakfast conversation involved a detailed report on his previous day's solar duties, but his descriptions of various mortal cities and countryside locations carried undertones suggesting personal interest beyond mere professional responsibility. His account of sunset timing adjustments over a particular Mediterranean coastal region included unnecessary detail about the beauty of local flora and the charm of seaside villages, details that implied ground-level observation rather than aerial surveying from his solar chariot. Artemis listened to her twin brother's report with the focused attention of someone skilled in detecting deception and misdirection. Her own account of forest management activities was deliberately brief and factual, providing contrast to Apollo's romantically inflected descriptions, while establishing her credibility as a reliable source of unbiased information. The hunting goddess's reputation for honesty made her observations particularly valuable for deities seeking accurate intelligence about divine activities. Demeter's breakfast conversation focused on agricultural planning and seasonal coordination, but her requests for specific weather patterns in certain mortal regions suggested personal investment beyond normal professional requirements. Her detailed knowledge of particular farming communities and their individual characteristics implied regular personal contact that might involve romantic interests among mortal agricultural leaders. The goddess of harvest had always maintained close relationships with mortal farmers, but her current level of specific knowledge suggested deeper involvement than usual. Poseidon's arrival at breakfast was delayed by what he described as urgent oceanic administrative duties, but the salt spray still clinging to his hair, and Chiton suggested activities that involved surface travel rather than deep-sea management work. His account of coastal weather coordination requirements included specific mention of harbour conditions in several mortal cities known for their beautiful ports and attractive maritime populations. The sea god's interest in mortal sailing activities had always provided convenient cover for romantic pursuits among coastal populations. The nectar service began as the ambrosia portion of breakfast neared completion, with Hestia employing specialised equipment designed to accommodate the complex social dynamics surrounding divine wine consumption. The nectar itself was prepared from grapes that had been selected not only for their divine properties, but also for their ability to enhance social harmony, while reducing the likelihood of explosive emotional reactions during family gatherings. Each deity's goblet was crafted from materials that complemented their divine nature, while providing subtle influence over their emotional responses to alcohol consumption. Zeus's crystal goblet was designed to promote confidence while reducing guilt-induced anxiety, while Hera's silver cup enhanced emotional clarity, while providing protection against manipulation. The careful engineering of drinking vessels represented another layer of Hestia's effort to maintain domestic peace during potentially volatile social situations. The pouring of nectar followed protocols that had been refined over centuries of managing divine family meals during periods of romantic crisis. The service order acknowledged formal hierarchy, while avoiding sequences that might force direct confrontation between romantically entangled deities. Hestia's movements around the table were choreographed to minimise opportunities for uncomfortable eye contact or whispered conversations that might escalate tensions. The nectar itself flowed differently into each goblet depending on the emotional state and recent activities of the recipient. Zeus's portion took on subtle golden highlights that reflected his current satisfaction with romantic success, while Hera's serving remained clear and pure, suggesting emotional control despite underlying stress. Aphrodite's nectar showed faint pink coloration that confirmed recent amorous activity, while Ares's cup displayed deep red tones indicating passionate involvement. As breakfast progressed toward its conclusion, the careful social performance that had characterized the meal began to show signs of strain. Small inconsistencies in stories, meaningful glances between certain deities, and the particular way Zeus savoured his nectar while avoiding direct eye contact with Hera suggested that the morning's diplomatic facade was concealing relationship developments that would soon require more direct acknowledgement. The conclusion of breakfast was marked by the traditional toast to divine unity and cosmic harmony, but the words carried ironic undertones given the romantic tensions and concealed conflicts that characterized actual divine family dynamics. Each deity raised their goblet with appropriate solemnity while privately contemplating the gap between official mythology and emotional reality in their immortal household. As the gods began to disperse toward their daily responsibilities, Hera noticed that Zeus lingered over his nectar with the particular expression of someone savouring private memories. But what caught her attention more specifically was the way Aphrodite's perfume seemed to complement rather than contrast with the faint scent of jasmine and myrrh that still clung almost imperceptibly to Zeus's morning appearance, a combination that suggested either coincidence or coordination that warranted further investigation. Weaving fates and spinning time. The ordinary work of goddesses, the combination of fragrances that Hera detected during breakfast, Aphrodite's signature rose perfume mingling with the jasmine and myrrh that still clung to Zeus's carefully groomed appearance, occupied her thoughts as she made her way to her private workroom for the morning's weaving session. The correlation between scents was too precise to be coincidental, suggesting either that Zeus had been in close proximity to Aphrodite during his previous evening's activities, or that both deities had encountered the same mortal woman whose perfume had left traces on each of them. The possibility that her husband and the goddess of love might be collaborating in romantic pursuits added new layers of complexity to Hera's ongoing surveillance of divine infidelity. Aphrodite's involvement in Zeus's affairs had always been suspected but never definitively proven, as the goddess of love maintained careful diplomatic neutrality in most divine romantic conflicts. If she was now actively facilitating Zeus's mortal conquests, this represented a significant escalation in the sophistication of divine adultery that would require corresponding advances in Hera's investigative techniques. Hera's workroom had been arranged over the centuries to serve multiple functions beyond simple textile creation. It provided a space for private contemplation, strategic planning, and the kind of detailed analytical work that was required to track complex patterns of divine romantic behaviour across multiple relationships and time periods. The loom itself was positioned to take advantage of optimal natural lighting, while providing clear sight lines to windows that offered surveillance opportunities over various sections of the palace complex and surrounding gardens. The morning's weaving project was a tapestry depicting the marriages of mortal rulers throughout Mediterranean civilizations, but the work had evolved over recent months to include subtle documentation of divine interventions in mortal romantic affairs. Each royal wedding represented in the textile carried hidden details that recorded which gods had attended, what influences they had exerted, and whether divine romantic interests had affected the political implications of mortal unions. The tapestry served both as artistic achievement and as intelligence archive. The threads for this morning's work had been selected specifically for their ability to retain psychic impressions from the hands that spun them, creating a textile that would preserve not only visual information, but also emotional context about the events it depicted. The cotton fibres came from plants that had been watered with tears shed during wedding ceremonies, both joyful and tragic, while the silk threads were produced by worms that had fed on mulberry leaves, gathered during significant romantic encounters between gods and mortals. As Hera settled into the familiar rhythm of weaving, the repetitive motions of shuttle and heddle provided mental space for processing the morning's observations and developing hypotheses about current divine romantic activities. The mechanical aspects of textile work allowed her consciousness to function on multiple levels simultaneously, maintaining perfect technical execution while conducting complex analysis of relationship patterns and emotional dynamics. The section of tapestry she was currently completing showed the wedding of a Trojan prince whose ceremony had been attended by multiple Olympian deities, each pursuing their own romantic and political agendas among the mortal wedding guests. Zeus had officially attended to provide divine blessing for the union, but Hera's careful documentation revealed that his actual interest had focused on the bride's younger sister, whose beauty had captured his attention during the ceremonial preparations. The weaving of the bride's sister's image required threads that had been dyed with pigments extracted from flowers that had witnessed divine seduction: jasmine for innocent attraction, rose for developed passion, and myrrh for the ceremonial aspects of religious encounters that provided convenient cover for romantic pursuits. The combination of these specific colours in the textile created a permanent record of Zeus's romantic methodology, while appearing to external observers as simple decorative elements in a conventional wedding scene. Each thread placement in this section of the tapestry required careful attention to symbolic accuracy and evidential documentation. The positioning of figures relative to divine attendees recorded the progression of Zeus's seduction strategy, while the colours and textures of their clothing indicated the social dynamics that had facilitated divine intervention in mortal affairs. Future examination of the completed textile would allow Hera to reference specific details about divine romantic techniques for comparison with current activities. The technical demands of this documentary weaving required tools that had been specially crafted for precision work with symbolically significant materials. Hera's shuttle was carved from wood taken from trees that had witnessed important romantic encounters, its surface polished smooth by centuries of use in creating textiles that preserve divine relationship histories. The heddles were made from threads spun by the fates themselves, ensuring perfect accuracy in the separation and organisation of symbolic elements within the weave structure. As the morning's work progressed, Hera began to incorporate new elements that reflected her current investigation into Zeus's latest romantic activities. The jasmine and myrrh combination that had characterised his morning appearance suggested involvement with someone of royal or priestly status, as these expensive perfumes were typically available only to women of elevated social position. The presence of similar scents on Aphrodite indicated either coordination between the deities or shared interest in the same mortal individual. The weaving of new investigative elements into the tapestry required careful consideration of colour symbolism and thread placement to ensure accurate documentation without creating obvious patterns that might be detected by other deities who examine the work. Hera employed techniques developed over centuries of covert intelligence gathering, using traditional decorative motifs to conceal specific information about divine romantic activities, while maintaining the artistic integrity of the overall composition. The morning light streaming through the workroom windows provided optimal conditions for detailed thread work, while also offering surveillance opportunities over various sections of the palace complex. From her position at the loom, Hera could observe the garden paths where private conversations often took place, the courtyards where messages were exchanged, and the balconies where deities sometimes conducted romantic assignations during daylight hours, when darkness no longer provided concealment. The rhythm of weaving created a meditative state that enhanced Hera's ability to notice subtle patterns in divine behaviour that might otherwise escape conscious attention. The repetitive motions of working the loom synchronized with her breathing and heartbeat, creating optimal conditions for the kind of intuitive analysis that complemented her systematic intelligence gathering. Small details observed during breakfast, inconsistencies in morning routines, and unusual social dynamics all became clearer when processed during the focused concentration of textile work. Through the eastern windows, Hera could see Aphrodite working in a rose garden, but the goddess of love's attention seemed divided between horticultural activities and frequent glances toward the palace's administrative wing, where Zeus conducted his official duties. The pattern of her movements suggested either anticipation of a planned meeting or anxiety about communications that had not yet arrived. The careful way she arranged cut flowers in her gathering basket implied preparation for presentation to someone whose approval she sought. The roses that Aphrodite selected were primarily deep red varieties associated with passionate love rather than the pink blooms that characterized more innocent romantic attraction. The specific colour choices indicated that whatever romantic situation she was facilitating had progressed beyond preliminary courtship into more serious emotional and physical involvement. The inclusion of white roses in her arrangement suggested efforts to maintain some appearance of purity or innocence, despite the obvious passionate undertones of the overall composition. From her elevated position in the workroom, Hera could also observe Apollo's activities in the palace's music chamber, where the god of poetry appeared to be composing new songs with unusual intensity and focus. The windows of the music chamber were open to allow sound to carry across the palace complex, and the melodies that drifted upward contained emotional themes that confirmed romantic inspiration from recent personal experiences. The musical phrases suggested narrative progression from initial attraction through successful seduction to satisfied possession. The timing of Apollo's musical composition, coinciding with Zeus's obvious satisfaction and Aphrodite's anticipatory behaviour, suggested possible coordination between multiple deities in romantic activities that might involve shared mortal interest or collaborative seduction strategies. The complexity of these potential connections required careful analysis and documentation to understand the full scope of divine romantic manipulation that might be affecting mortal affairs across multiple geographic regions. Artemis appeared briefly in the eastern courtyard, her hunting attire and practical equipment contrasting sharply with the romantic atmosphere that seemed to characterize other divine activities. The goddess of the hunt paused near Aphrodite's garden, her conversation with the goddess of love brief but intense enough to suggest either sharing of important information or coordination of activities that required both divine domains. The strategic timing of their meeting during morning hours when other deities were occupied with routine activities implied deliberate privacy considerations. The interaction between Artemis and Aphrodite was particularly interesting given their normally opposing approaches to romantic relationships. Artemis's commitment to chastity and independence contrasted with Aphrodite's active promotion of passionate romantic involvement. Any collaboration between these deities would represent unusual circumstances requiring extraordinary motivation, possibly related to divine family politics or complex romantic situations that affected multiple Olympian relationships simultaneously. Hera's weaving technique allowed her to record observations about divine interactions through the symbolic placement of threads and colours that corresponded to specific behavioural patterns and relationship dynamics. The textile became a permanent record of surveillance data that could be referenced and analysed over extended time periods, providing historical context for understanding current romantic developments within their broader patterns of divine relationship evolution. The thread she selected for recording today's observations included silver strands that represented hidden communications, gold fibres that indicated royal or elevated mortal involvement, and copper elements that suggested collaborative activities between multiple deities. The specific combination and arrangement of these materials within the tapestry structure created coded documentation that preserved intelligence information while appearing to casual observation as conventional decorative elements in a traditional wedding scene. As midday approached, and the morning's weaving session drew toward completion, Hera began to synthesize her various observations into preliminary conclusions about current divine romantic activities. The coordination between Zeus, Aphrodite, and possibly Apollo suggested a sophisticated operation involving multiple divine domains and potentially affecting significant mortal political or religious situations. The expensive perfumes, royal associations, and ceremonial elements all pointed toward involvement with high-status mortal individuals whose romantic entanglements with gods might have far-reaching consequences. The methodical documentation of these patterns through textile work provided both emotional outlet for processing marital stress and practical intelligence gathering that would inform future strategic decisions about managing divine family dynamics. The weaving process itself served therapeutic functions while creating permanent records that might prove valuable for understanding long-term trends in divine romantic behaviour and their effects on both immortal relationships and mortal civilizations. The completion of the morning's weaving revealed new sections of the tapestry that captured not only the official narrative of mortal royal marriages, but also the hidden story of divine romantic intervention that shaped political alliances and cultural developments across Mediterranean civilizations. Each thread placement represented careful analysis and strategic thinking about the complex relationships between immortal desires and mortal consequences. But as Hera stepped back to examine her morning's work, she noticed that certain thread colours had shifted slightly from their original hues, taking on subtle variations that suggested exposure to divine influences beyond her own weaving activities. The threads themselves seemed to be responding to proximity to other divine romantic activities, changing their symbolic properties in ways that indicated even more complex connections between current immortal affairs than her systematic observation had yet revealed. Divine correspondence. How gods communicated across the realms. The subtle colour variations that Hera had discovered in her weaving threads suggested a level of divine romantic complexity that extended far beyond her individual surveillance capabilities, requiring a more systematic approach to intelligence gathering across the various communication networks that connected Olympian deities with each other and with the mortal world below. The interconnected nature of divine affairs meant that no single romantic entanglement existed in isolation. Each affair, betrayal, and punishment rippled through multiple relationships, affecting political alliances, family dynamics, and the elaborate system of favours and obligations that governed immortal society. The communication chamber that Hera visited each afternoon had evolved over millennia from a simple message coordination centre into the nerve centre of divine intelligence operations, where information about romantic relationships, political conspiracies, and social dynamics was collected, analysed, and selectively distributed according to the complex protocols that governed divine diplomatic relations. The chamber's crystalline walls had been enhanced over the centuries with acoustic properties that could detect subtle emotional undertones in transmitted messages, allowing experienced operators to identify deception, romantic tension, and hidden agendas in even carefully crafted communications. The afternoon session began with Hera's review of message traffic from the previous 12 hours, a routine that had become essential for tracking the rapid evolution of divine romantic situations and their effects on broader Olympian society. The message logs were maintained on crystal tablets that preserved not only the content of communications, but also the emotional context, timing patterns, and delivery methods that provided crucial intelligence about the true nature of divine relationships beneath their official diplomatic facades. The first category of messages involved routine administrative communications between deities responsible for coordinating natural phenomena, but even these supposedly neutral exchanges contained subtle indicators of romantic tension and alliance formation. Apollo's requests for weather coordination with Demeter included unnecessarily detailed specifications about atmospheric conditions over certain mortal agricultural regions, suggesting personal interest beyond professional responsibility. The goddess of harvest responses showed similar attention to specific geographic areas, implying coordination of divine activities that might involve shared romantic interests among mortal farming populations. Poseidon's oceanic reports contained references to coastal weather patterns that required coordination with land-based atmospheric management, but his communications with Demeter showed particular concern for shoreline conditions near fishing villages known for their beautiful sea nymphs and attractive mortal fishermen's daughters. The sea god's official responsibilities provided perfect cover for romantic pursuits among coastal populations, while his correspondence with agricultural deities created opportunities for collaborative seduction strategies that involved multiple divine domains. The second category of message traffic involved more sensitive communications between deities whose romantic relationships affected their professional responsibilities and family obligations. Aphrodite's correspondence with various Olympian deities had increased significantly over the previous weeks, with message frequency and emotional intensity suggesting active coordination of romantic activities that extended beyond her normal role as goddess of love. Her communications with Ares maintained the careful neutrality required to conceal their ongoing affair, but subtle word choices and timing patterns revealed intimate coordination of their daily activities. The analysis of Aphrodite's message patterns required specialized techniques developed specifically for detecting hidden meanings in communications between romantically involved deities. Her messages to Ares used agricultural metaphors that referenced specific seasons and growing conditions, creating a code that allowed them to coordinate meetings while appearing to discuss legitimate divine responsibilities. References to spring planting indicated planned romantic encounters, while harvest preparations suggested longer-term relationship planning that might affect their other divine obligations. Hera's own message exchanges with other deities had evolved over the centuries into sophisticated intelligence operations disguised as routine social correspondence. Her communications with Athena served multiple functions: gathering information about divine romantic activities, coordinating responses to Zeus's infidelities, and maintaining the political alliances necessary for managing complex family dynamics during periods of romantic crisis. The goddess of wisdom's scholarly approach to relationship analysis provided valuable objective perspective on emotional situations that might otherwise overwhelm rational decision-making. The morning's correspondence with Athena had included detailed analysis of recent behavioural patterns among male Olympian deities, with particular attention to coordination between Zeus, Apollo and Poseidon that suggested collaborative romantic activities involving high-status mortal women. Athena's systematic documentation of divine romantic behaviour provided historical context for understanding current developments within broader patterns of immortal relationship evolution and their effects on mortal civilizations. The technical aspects of divine communication involved specialized equipment designed to transmit not only verbal content, but also emotional context, subtle implications, and hidden meanings that characterized the complex social dynamics of Olympian society. The scrying bowl that served as Hera's primary communication device had been enhanced over the centuries with crystalline elements that could detect deception, romantic tension, and concealed agenda in transmitted messages, providing crucial intelligence about the true nature of divine relationships. The process of establishing communication links with other deities required careful attention to security protocols that prevented unauthorized surveillance, while maintaining the privacy necessary for sensitive diplomatic exchanges. Hera's afternoon communication sessions involved multiple layers of encryption and misdirection designed to protect intelligence operations from detection by the very deities whose activities were being monitored and analysed. The third category of message traffic involved communications between Olympian deities and their networks of minor gods, nymphs, and mortal agents who provided intelligence about romantic activities, political developments, and social dynamics across the Mediterranean world. These communications required particular care in handling, as they often contained explicit details about divine romantic encounters, mortal seduction strategies, and the complex web of favours and obligations that connected immortal desires with earthly consequences. Hera's network of informants had been carefully developed over centuries of managing divine marital crises, with particular attention to recruiting sources who had direct access to Zeus's romantic activities without obvious connection to his wife's intelligence operations. The network included river nymphs, who observed divine activities in remote natural settings, minor deities who attended mortal ceremonies where gods might pursue romantic interests, and even carefully selected mortal priestesses whose religious duties provided cover for monitoring divine romantic behaviour. The morning's intelligence reports from this network painted a detailed picture of recent divine romantic activities that confirmed Hera's suspicions about coordination between multiple Olympian deities in pursuing mortal romantic interests. 3 separate sources had reported Zeus's presence at mortal religious ceremonies in different Mediterranean regions, with each appearance involving interaction with beautiful young women of royal or priestly status. The geographic distribution of these encounters suggested systematic romantic campaigning rather than random opportunistic affairs. The coordination of Zeus's romantic activities with Apollo's solar duties created opportunities for divine collaboration that maximized romantic success, while minimizing detection by other Olympian deities. Apollo's control over daylight timing allowed him to create optimal atmospheric conditions for romantic encounters, while his musical abilities provided emotional enhancement that made mortal women more susceptible to divine seduction. The systematic nature of this collaboration suggested long-term planning and coordination that extended beyond individual romantic encounters. The analysis of communication patterns between Zeus and Apollo revealed coded references to solar scheduling adjustments that corresponded with reported divine romantic activities in specific geographic regions. These adjustments involved subtle modifications to daylight duration, atmospheric clarity, and lighting quality that created ideal conditions for romantic pursuits, while appearing to external observers as routine divine administrative activities. The sophistication of this coordination indicated extensive experience in collaborative seduction strategies. Aphrodite's role in these collaborative romantic operations appeared to involve both strategic planning and practical support for divine seduction activities. Her communications with Zeus and Apollo contained references to beauty enhancement services and emotional preparation assistance that suggested active participation in romantic pursuits beyond her traditional role as passive goddess of love. The transformation of Aphrodite from neutral divine force to active collaborator in specific romantic campaigns represented a significant escalation in the sophistication of divine adultery. The 4th category of message traffic involved communications between Hera and her allies among both divine and mortal populations, who provided support for managing the political and emotional consequences of divine romantic scandals. These communications required the most sophisticated security protocols, as they often involved planning responses to Zeus's infidelities that might affect the stability of divine family relationships and the broader political balance within Olympian society. Artemis served as a crucial ally in these communications, her commitment to chastity and independence making her a reliable source of objective analysis about divine romantic activities without personal romantic agenda that might compromise her judgment. The goddess of the hunt's network of woodland creatures and minor nature deities provided extensive surveillance capabilities across rural areas, where gods often pursued romantic interests among mortal agricultural and pastoral populations. The morning's communication with Artemis had included detailed reports about divine activities in forested regions, with particular attention to romantic encounters that violated traditional protocols governing god-mortal relationships. Several recent incidents had involved divine seduction of mortal women who were under Artemis's protection, creating potential conflicts between different divine domains that that required careful diplomatic management to prevent escalation into broader family disputes. The analysis of these communications revealed patterns of divine romantic behaviour that suggested systematic violation of traditional boundaries between different divine responsibilities, with male Olympian deities increasingly treating the entire mortal world as territory for romantic conquest regardless of existing divine protections or obligations. This expansion of romantic territorialism created potential for conflicts that could destabilize the careful balance of divine family relationships and political alliances. Demeter's communications provided additional intelligence about divine romantic activities in agricultural regions, where her responsibilities for crop management and seasonal coordination brought her into regular contact with farming communities that attracted divine romantic attention. The goddess of harvest had developed sophisticated techniques for monitoring divine activities in rural areas, while maintaining the appearance of focusing exclusively on agricultural duties and seasonal management responsibilities. The morning's correspondence with Demeter had included reports about divine activities during recent harvest festivals, where religious celebrations provided cover for romantic pursuits among mortal agricultural populations. Zeus had been observed at multiple harvest celebrations in different regions, with each appearance involving romantic interaction with festival participants whose beauty had attracted divine attention. The systematic nature of these festival appearances suggested coordinated romantic campaigning that exploited religious observances for seduction opportunities. The coordination between Zeus's festival appearances and Demeter's seasonal responsibilities created opportunities for divine romantic collaboration that maximized access to mortal populations while minimizing detection by other divine authorities. Demeter's control over agricultural timing allowed her to coordinate harvest festivals with Zeus's availability, while her influence over crop yields provided leverage for encouraging mortal cooperation with divine romantic interests. The fifth category of message traffic involved the most sensitive communications related to active intelligence operations designed to gather evidence about specific divine romantic activities and their potential consequences for both immortal and mortal populations. These operations required coordination between multiple allied deities and their networks of informants, with careful attention to operational security that prevented detection by the targets of investigation. The current investigation into Zeus's latest romantic activities had expanded beyond simple surveillance to include active intelligence gathering about the mortal women involved, their social and political connections, and the potential consequences of divine romantic intervention in their lives. The investigation had revealed that Zeus's recent romantic interests included the daughter of a prominent Phoenician king, whose political alliances could be significantly affected by divine romantic involvement. The political implications of Zeus's romantic pursuit extended beyond personal marital considerations to include potential effects on trade relationships, military alliances and religious practices across Mediterranean civilizations. The Phoenician princess's marriage prospects were connected to diplomatic negotiations between multiple city-states, while her father's kingdom played crucial roles in regional trade networks that could be disrupted by divine romantic interference. The analysis of these broader implications required collaboration between Hera's intelligence network and Athena's scholarly research into political and economic relationships among mortal civilizations. The goddess of wisdom's systematic documentation of mortal political dynamics provided crucial context for understanding how divine romantic activities might affect broader historical developments and cultural evolution across the Mediterranean world. The operational planning for managing the consequences of Zeus's romantic activities involved careful coordination between multiple divine authorities, with particular attention to preventing romantic scandals from escalating into political or military conflicts that might require direct divine intervention. The complexity of these operations demonstrated how individual romantic choices by powerful divine figures could create cascading effects across multiple levels of both immortal and mortal society. As the afternoon's communication session drew toward completion, Hera began to synthesize the various intelligence reports and analytical assessments into a comprehensive understanding of current divine romantic activities and their potential consequences. The evidence pointed toward a sophisticated network of collaborative romantic operations involving multiple Olympian deities, with systematic violation of traditional boundaries and protocols that governed divine romantic behaviour. But the most disturbing discovery was the evidence that Zeus's romantic activities were no longer random opportunistic affairs, but had evolved into systematic romantic campaigns with specific political and strategic objectives that extended far beyond personal gratification. The coordination with other deities, the careful selection of mortal targets with significant political connections, and the sophisticated operational security all suggested that divine adultery had become a tool of cosmic political manipulation with consequences that could reshape the entire Mediterranean world. The architecture of immortality, building and maintaining Olympian palaces, the comprehensive intelligence that Hera had gathered through her afternoon communications, painted a disturbing picture of divine romantic operations that extended far beyond personal infidelity into systematic political manipulation of mortal civilizations. But the full implications of these discoveries would require careful analysis in environments secure from surveillance by the very deities whose activities were being investigated. Her evening inspection of Olympian architecture provided the perfect cover for this analytical work, as the routine maintenance of divine buildings offered both privacy and the meditative framework necessary for processing complex intelligence about immortal romantic conspiracies. The architectural inspection route that Hera followed each evening had been carefully designed over the centuries to provide surveillance opportunities over various sections of the palace complex, while appearing to focus entirely on structural maintenance and engineering assessment. The pathways between buildings, the vantage points from elevated structures, and the timing of inspection activities all allowed for systematic observation of divine activities while maintaining the appearance of routine administrative responsibility. The evening light that filtered through the crystal windows of Zeus's palace created optimal conditions for both detailed architectural examination and discreet surveillance of the social dynamics that played out in courtyards, gardens, and private chambers throughout the divine complex. The golden illumination revealed not only the structural details that required inspection, but also the subtle signs of divine romantic activity that might otherwise escape notice during the busier daylight hours, when official duties provided cover for personal relationships. Hera's inspection began with the foundation levels of the palace complex, where the massive stone blocks that supported the entire divine architectural system required regular monitoring for structural integrity and load-bearing capacity. But these deep chambers also provided access to acoustic phenomena that allowed surveillance of conversations and activities taking place in various parts of the palace complex, as sound travelled through the stone structures in predictable patterns that experienced listeners could interpret for intelligence-gathering purposes. The resonance testing that formed the core of foundation inspection involved striking stone blocks with specialised hammers to assess their internal condition, but the tones produced by these tests also masked other acoustic surveillance activities that allowed monitoring of conversations taking place in chambers throughout the palace. The systematic progression of testing provided cover for extended listening sessions that could capture valuable intelligence about divine romantic planning and coordination activities. As Hera moved through the foundation chambers, conducting her routine structural assessments, she became aware of conversations taking place in Zeus's private study, directly above her current position. The acoustic properties of the divine architecture transmitted sound through the stone structures with remarkable clarity, allowing her to monitor discussions that would normally be completely private and secure from surveillance. The conversation involved Zeus, Apollo, and what appeared to be a minor deity, whose voice Hera did not immediately recognize, but whose tone suggested nervousness and subordinate status relative to the major Olympian participants. The discussion centred on coordination of divine activities in mortal religious festivals, with particular attention to ceremonial events that would provide opportunities for romantic interaction with high-status mortal women who attended as participants or observers. The systematic nature of their planning revealed that divine romantic activities had evolved into carefully orchestrated operations with specific objectives, target selection criteria, and sophisticated operational procedures designed to maximise romantic success while minimising detection by other divine authorities. Apollo's role appeared to involve both atmospheric manipulation to create optimal romantic conditions and musical enhancement to increase the susceptibility of mortal women to divine seduction. The minor deity's contribution to the planning involved intelligence gathering about mortal social dynamics, political relationships, and individual biographical information that would inform seduction strategies tailored to specific romantic targets. The level of detail in this intelligence suggested extensive surveillance networks and systematic data collection that treated mortal romantic conquest as a form of military campaign, requiring thorough preparation and tactical coordination. Zeus's leadership of these planning sessions demonstrated that his romantic activities had evolved far beyond impulsive adultery into systematic political manipulation that used romantic relationships as tools for influencing mortal civilizations according to divine strategic objectives. The coordination of multiple deities in these operations indicated that divine romantic behaviour had become a collective enterprise with implications that extended throughout Olympian society. The acoustic surveillance opportunities provided by Foundation inspection allowed Hera to gather detailed intelligence about specific upcoming romantic operations, including target identification, operational timing, and the roles that various deities would play in facilitating successful seduction of mortal women with significant political or religious influence. This information provided crucial advance warning that would allow her to develop countermeasures and defensive strategies. The inspection of load-bearing columns in the palace's main structural system required specialised equipment designed to measure stress distribution and detect any changes in structural behaviour that might indicate foundation problems or architectural instability. But the column inspection process also provided access to elevated observation positions that offered surveillance opportunities over various courtyard areas where private meetings and romantic assignations often took place during evening hours. From her position high on the inspection scaffolding that surrounded one of the palace's major support columns, Hera could observe activities in multiple courtyards simultaneously, while maintaining the appearance of focusing entirely on structural engineering assessment. The evening lighting conditions created optimal visibility for surveillance, while providing enough shadow and visual complexity to conceal her observation activities from the subjects being monitored. Aphrodite was conducting what appeared to be a coordination meeting with several minor deities whose responsibilities involved mortal romantic relationships, marriage ceremonies, and fertility rituals. The goddess of love's central role in these discussions suggested that she was actively managing a network of divine agents who facilitated romantic operations throughout the mortal world, according to systematic plans and strategic objectives. The participants in this coordination meeting included deities responsible for different aspects of mortal romantic experience: emotional manipulation, physical attraction, enhancement, social opportunity creation, and obstacle removal. Their systematic approach to divine romantic intervention demonstrated sophisticated understanding of mortal psychology and social dynamics that allowed precise targeting of specific individuals for seduction according to carefully planned operational protocols. The detailed nature of their planning included psychological profiles of potential romantic targets, analysis of their social and political relationships, assessment of their vulnerability to different seduction techniques, and coordination of multiple divine influences to create optimal conditions for successful romantic conquest. This level of systematic planning transformed divine romantic behaviour from random personal indulgence into professional military-style operations with specific objectives and measurable success criteria. Ares appeared briefly in one of the courtyards, his interaction with Aphrodite carefully structured to appear casual, while actually serving coordination functions for their ongoing romantic relationship and their collaborative support for other divine romantic operations. The god of war's involvement in these activities suggested that divine romantic campaigns had acquired military-style organisation and strategic planning that treated mortal seduction as a form of conquest, requiring tactical coordination and operational security. The inspection of architectural decorative elements required close examination of carved stone details, painted surfaces, and metal fittings that might show signs of deterioration or damage from exposure to divine energy and atmospheric conditions. But this detailed visual inspection also provided opportunities for surveillance of private chambers whose windows and balconies were visible from elevated inspection positions throughout the palace complex. The decorative inspection process allowed Hera to observe activities in Zeus's private chambers, where the king of gods was conducting what appeared to be a personal grooming and preparation session that suggested planned romantic activity for the evening hours. The elaborate nature of his preparation, involving specialized clothing, grooming aids, and accessories not normally used for official divine duties, indicated that he was preparing for a significant romantic encounter rather than routine administrative activities. The timing and intensity of Zeus's preparations suggested coordination with the operational planning that Hera had overheard during her Foundation inspection, confirming that the systematic romantic campaigns involved not only strategic planning, but also careful attention to personal presentation and seduction techniques designed to maximize effectiveness with specific mortal targets. The professional approach to divine romantic activity demonstrated sophisticated understanding of human psychology and attraction dynamics. Apollo was conducting similar preparation activities in his own chambers, with particular attention to musical instruments and compositions that would provide emotional manipulation during planned romantic encounters. The god of music's role in divine romantic operations appeared to involve both atmospheric enhancement and direct psychological influence through musical techniques that increased mortal susceptibility to divine seduction. The coordination between Zeus and Apollo's preparation activities confirmed their collaborative approach to divine romantic operations, with each deity contributing specialized skills and resources to maximize the effectiveness of their joint romantic campaigns. This systematic cooperation represented a significant evolution in divine romantic behavior from individual competitive pursuit to coordinated team-based seduction strategies. The inspection of roofing systems and weather protection elements required access to the highest levels of the palace complex, where specialized equipment monitored atmospheric conditions and coordinated weather management activities with other divine authorities responsible for natural phenomena. But these elevated positions also provided the most comprehensive surveillance opportunities over the entire divine complex and surrounding areas where romantic activities might take place. From the palace roof, Hera could observe the entire network of gardens, courtyards, and private chambers where divine romantic activities were planned and executed, while also monitoring the pathways and transportation systems that connected Olympus with the mortal world below. The comprehensive surveillance capabilities from these elevated positions allowed systematic documentation of divine romantic operations and their coordination with broader divine administrative activities. The weather monitoring equipment that was maintained as part of routine architectural inspection included communication devices that could intercept divine messages and atmospheric disturbances created by divine transportation and transformation activities. This equipment provided additional intelligence gathering capabilities that complemented the direct surveillance opportunities available from elevated observation positions. The evening surveillance revealed extensive coordination between multiple divine romantic operations, with systematic scheduling that maximized operational efficiency while minimizing the risk of detection by unauthorized divine observers. The level of organisation and strategic planning demonstrated that divine romantic behaviour had evolved into a sophisticated network of collaborative operations with implications that extended throughout both divine and mortal societies. The integration of romantic operations with official divine duties created opportunities for using legitimate administrative activities as cover for personal romantic pursuits, while also ensuring that romantic activities served broader strategic objectives related to divine influence over mortal political and religious developments. This integration of personal and professional activities represented a fundamental transformation in the nature of divine government and cosmic administration. The systematic documentation of architectural inspection activities provided both legitimate maintenance records and comprehensive intelligence archives that preserved detailed information about divine romantic operations for future analysis and reference. The dual-purpose nature of these records allowed Hera to maintain extensive surveillance databases while appearing to focus entirely on routine administrative responsibilities. As the evening's architectural inspection drew toward completion, Hera compiled her observations into preliminary assessments of current divine romantic operations and their potential consequences for both immortal family relationships and mortal political stability. The evidence pointed towards systematic romantic campaigns with specific strategic objectives that extended far beyond personal gratification to include political manipulation and cultural influence on a Mediterranean-wide scale. The architectural inspection process had revealed not only the structural integrity of divine buildings, but also the complex network of romantic relationships and political alliances that operated within and around these structures. The palace complex itself had become both the operational headquarters for systematic romantic campaigns and the primary surveillance target for intelligence operations designed to monitor and counteract these activities. But the most disturbing discovery was the evidence that divine romantic operations had achieved such sophisticated organisation and strategic coordination that they represented a parallel system of divine government operating alongside and sometimes in competition with official Olympian administrative structures. The implications of this parallel system extended beyond marital infidelity to include fundamental questions about the nature of divine authority and cosmic governance. Seasonal duties and celestial scheduling, the gods' administrative tasks. The discovery that divine romantic operations had evolved into a parallel system of cosmic governance operating alongside official Olympian administrative structures represented a fundamental challenge to the established order of immortal society, requiring Hera to expand her investigation into the complex intersections between personal relationships, political alliances, and the systematic management of natural phenomena that sustained both divine civilization and mortal existence across the Mediterranean world. The evening's celestial scheduling duties provided the perfect opportunity for this expanded analysis, as the coordination of natural phenomena required intimate knowledge of divine activities, motivations, and collaborative relationships that might reveal the full scope of romantic conspiracy affecting cosmic administration. The Celestial Coordination Center that served as headquarters for divine administrative activities had evolved over millennia into the nerve center of cosmic government, where the complex schedules that governed natural phenomena were coordinated with the personal agendas, political objectives, and romantic pursuits of individual Olympian deities who possessed the power to influence weather patterns, seasonal transitions, and astronomical events according to their own interests and alliances. The integration of personal motivations with cosmic responsibilities created opportunities for systematic manipulation of natural phenomena to serve romantic and political objectives that might conflict with broader divine governance principles. The evening scheduling session began with Hera's review of the previous day's celestial activities and their coordination with divine personal agendas, a routine that had become essential for detecting patterns of natural phenomenon manipulation that might serve romantic or political purposes rather than legitimate cosmic administration. The scheduling records were maintained on crystalline tablets that preserved not only the technical specifications of natural phenomena, but also the emotional context, personal motivations, and hidden agendas that influence divine decision-making about cosmic events. The analysis of recent weather patterns revealed systematic anomalies that correlated with known divine romantic activities, suggesting that natural phenomena were being manipulated to create optimal conditions for seduction, romantic encounters, and political influence operations targeting mortal populations across multiple geographic regions. Apollo's solar management activities showed particular attention to atmospheric conditions over regions where Zeus had been conducting romantic pursuits, with lighting quality, temperature variations, and weather timing all adjusted to enhance romantic opportunities rather than serve broader agricultural or navigational needs. The coordination between Apollo's atmospheric manipulation and Zeus's romantic activities demonstrated sophisticated understanding of environmental psychology and its effects on mortal emotional states, with systematic creation of weather conditions that increase susceptibility to divine seduction while appearing to external observers as routine cosmic administration. The technical sophistication of these environmental manipulation techniques indicated extensive collaboration between divine authorities responsible for different aspects of natural phenomenon management. Demeter's agricultural scheduling activities showed similar patterns of systematic manipulation designed to support divine romantic operations, with crop timing, soil conditions, and harvest schedules adjusted to coordinate with romantic pursuits among farming populations rather than optimize agricultural productivity according to scientific principles. The goddess of harvest had been coordinating planting schedules with divine festival appearances, creating opportunities for romantic encounters during agricultural celebrations while maintaining the appearance of focusing entirely on crop management responsibilities. The integration of agricultural scheduling with divine romantic operations created opportunities for systematic influence over mortal food production, economic relationships, and social structures that served broader political objectives beyond individual romantic gratification. The control over agricultural timing provided leverage for influencing mortal political allegiances, trade relationships, and religious practices according to divine strategic interests that might conflict with mortal welfare and autonomous cultural development. Poseidon's oceanic scheduling revealed extensive coordination with coastal romantic activities, with tidal patterns, sea conditions, and weather systems adjusted to facilitate divine romantic pursuits among maritime populations, while appearing to focus on legitimate oceanic administration. The sea god's control over coastal weather provided opportunities for creating romantic atmospheric conditions during fishing expeditions, maritime festivals, and seaside ceremonies that attracted divine romantic attention. The systematic manipulation of oceanic phenomena to support romantic operations demonstrated how divine control over natural phenomena could be used to influence mortal economic activities, trade relationships, and cultural practices according to personal romantic interests rather than broader cosmic governance principles. The coordination between oceanic scheduling and divine romantic activities indicated sophisticated long-term planning that treated natural phenomenon management as a tool for personal and political manipulation. The analysis of seasonal coordination revealed the most extensive evidence of systematic natural phenomenon manipulation designed to serve divine romantic and political objectives rather than legitimate cosmic administration. The traditional seasonal progression that governed agricultural cycles, animal behavior patterns, and mortal cultural activities had been systematically modified to create optimal conditions for divine romantic operations throughout the Mediterranean world. Autumn scheduling had been adjusted to extend harvest seasons in regions where divine romantic activities were planned, creating additional opportunities for romantic encounters during agricultural festivals, while disrupting traditional seasonal rhythms that governed mortal economic and social activities. The extension of favourable weather conditions served immediate divine romantic interests, while potentially affecting long-term agricultural sustainability and cultural stability in affected regions. Winter scheduling showed evidence of systematic weather modification designed to create opportunities for indoor romantic encounters, with storm patterns, temperature variations, and seasonal lighting adjusted to encourage mortal populations to gather in enclosed spaces where divine seduction activities could proceed with minimal external interference. The manipulation of winter weather patterns demonstrated how divine romantic operations had evolved to exploit seasonal vulnerabilities in mortal social organization. Spring scheduling revealed extensive coordination between multiple divine authorities in creating optimal conditions for romantic renewal and relationship development, with atmospheric conditions, plant growth patterns, and animal behavior cycles all adjusted to support divine romantic campaigns during the season traditionally associated with fertility and romantic attraction. The systematic manipulation of spring phenomena indicated that divine romantic operations had achieved sophisticated integration with natural cycles governing reproductive behavior across multiple species. Summer scheduling showed the most complex patterns of natural phenomenon manipulation, with solar intensity, temperature distribution, and weather patterns coordinated across multiple geographic regions to support simultaneous divine romantic operations while maintaining the appearance of routine cosmic administration. The coordination of summer phenomena required collaboration between multiple divine authorities and demonstrated sophisticated understanding of regional climate systems and their effects on mortal behavior patterns. The technical aspects of celestial scheduling required specialized equipment designed to coordinate natural phenomena across vast geographic areas while accounting for the complex interactions between different types of environmental systems and their effects on both divine and mortal activities. The scheduling instruments included atmospheric pressure monitors that tracked divine energy concentrations, weather pattern predictors that modeled the effects of divine interventions, and communication systems that coordinated activities between divine authorities responsible for different aspects of natural phenomenon management. The operation of these technical systems required extensive collaboration between divine authorities whose personal relationships and romantic entanglements might create conflicts of interest that affected cosmic administration quality and consistency. The integration of personal agendas with technical responsibilities created opportunities for systematic manipulation of scheduling data and operational procedures that served individual romantic interests rather than broader cosmic governance objectives. The communication protocols that governed coordination between divine authorities responsible for different aspects of celestial scheduling had evolved over centuries to accommodate the complex web of romantic relationships, political alliances, and personal rivalries that characterized Olympian society. These protocols included procedures for managing conflicts of interest, coordinating activities between romantically involved deities, and preventing personal relationships from disrupting essential cosmic administration functions. The analysis of communication patterns between divine authorities revealed systematic violations of established protocols, with evidence of secret coordination between romantically allied deities, manipulation of scheduling data to serve personal interests, and deliberate exclusion of potentially opposing divine authorities from decision-making processes that affected cosmic administration. These violations indicated that romantic conspiracy had achieved systematic penetration of divine governmental structures. The documentation of protocol violations required careful analysis of message traffic, scheduling decisions, and operational outcomes to identify patterns of systematic manipulation that might otherwise be attributed to routine administrative variation or technical difficulties. The complexity of divine communication systems created opportunities for concealing unauthorized coordination and information sharing that served romantic and political objectives rather than legitimate cosmic administration. The security implications of romantic conspiracy within cosmic administration extended beyond personal relationship management to include fundamental questions about the integrity of natural phenomenon management and its effects on mortal civilizations that depended on consistent and predictable environmental conditions for agricultural, economic, and cultural stability. The systematic manipulation of natural phenomena to serve divine romantic interests represented a form of cosmic corruption that could have devastating consequences for mortal societies. The evening scheduling work revealed extensive evidence of systematic coordination between divine romantic operations and official cosmic administration, with natural phenomena systematically manipulated to serve personal and political objectives that might conflict with broader principles of cosmic governance and mortal welfare. The integration of romantic conspiracy with celestial scheduling indicated that divine romantic behaviour had evolved beyond personal relationship management into systematic political manipulation of natural phenomena. The coordination of seasonal scheduling with divine romantic campaigns required long-term planning that extended months and sometimes years into the future, with natural phenomenon management coordinated with anticipated romantic opportunities, political developments, and cultural events that might provide cover for divine seduction activities. This long-term coordination indicated sophisticated strategic planning that treated cosmic administration as a tool for systematic romantic and political manipulation. The analysis of historical scheduling data revealed that systematic manipulation of natural phenomena for romantic purposes had been developing gradually over centuries, with increasing sophistication and coordination as divine romantic operations evolved from individual opportunistic affairs into systematically planned campaigns with specific strategic objectives. The historical progression indicated that romantic conspiracy within cosmic administration represented a fundamental transformation in the nature of divine governance. The implications of this historical analysis extended beyond current romantic operations to include questions about the legitimacy and effectiveness of divine cosmic administration throughout recorded history, with potential revision required for understanding the true motivations behind historical natural phenomena, seasonal variations, and astronomical events that had been attributed to legitimate cosmic administration but might actually have served divine, romantic, and political objectives. The communication protocols that governed coordination between divine authorities responsible for different aspects of celestial scheduling had evolved over centuries to accommodate the complex web of romantic relationships, political alliances, and personal rivalries that characterized Olympian society. These protocols included procedures for managing conflicts of interest, coordinating activities between romantically involved deities, and preventing personal relationships from disrupting essential cosmic administration functions. The analysis of communication patterns between divine authorities revealed systematic violations of established protocols, with evidence of secret coordination between romantically allied deities, manipulation of scheduling data to serve personal interests, and deliberate exclusion of potentially opposing divine authorities from decision-making processes that affected cosmic administration. These violations indicated that romantic conspiracy had achieved systematic penetration of divine governmental structures. The documentation of protocol violations required careful analysis of message traffic, scheduling decisions, and operational outcomes to identify patterns of systematic manipulation that might otherwise be attributed to routine administrative variation or technical difficulties. The complexity of divine communication systems created opportunities for concealing unauthorized coordination and information sharing that served romantic and political objectives rather than legitimate cosmic administration. The security implications of romantic conspiracy within cosmic administration extended beyond personal relationship management to include fundamental questions about the integrity of natural phenomenon management and its effects on mortal civilizations that depended on consistent and predictable environmental conditions for agricultural, economic, and cultural stability. The systematic manipulation of natural phenomena to serve divine romantic interests represented a form of cosmic corruption that could have devastating consequences for mortal societies. The evening scheduling work revealed extensive evidence of systematic coordination between divine romantic operations and official cosmic administration, with natural phenomena systematically manipulated to serve personal and political objectives that might conflict with broader principles of cosmic governance and mortal welfare. The integration of romantic conspiracy with celestial scheduling indicated that divine romantic behaviour had evolved beyond personal relationship management into systematic political manipulation of natural phenomena. The coordination of seasonal scheduling with divine romantic campaigns required long-term planning that extended months and sometimes years into the future, with natural phenomenon management coordinated with anticipated romantic opportunities, political developments, and cultural events that might provide cover for divine seduction activities. This long-term coordination indicated sophisticated strategic planning that treated cosmic administration as a tool for systematic romantic and political manipulation. The analysis of historical scheduling data revealed that systematic manipulation of natural phenomena for romantic purposes had been developing gradually over centuries, with increasing sophistication and coordination as divine romantic operations evolved from individual opportunistic affairs into systematically planned campaigns with specific strategic objectives. The historical progression indicated that romantic conspiracy within cosmic administration represented a fundamental transformation in the nature of divine governance. The implications of this historical analysis extended beyond current romantic operations to include questions about the legitimacy and effectiveness of divine cosmic administration throughout recorded history, with potential revision required for understanding the true motivations behind historical natural phenomena, seasonal variations, and astronomical events that had been attributed to legitimate cosmic administration but might actually have served divine, romantic, and political objectives. Twilight Reflections: The Quiet Legacy of Divine Domesticity. The revolutionary implications of addressing systematic romantic conspiracy within cosmic governance structures weighed heavily on Hera's consciousness as twilight settled over Mount Olympus, casting long shadows across the marble corridors where centuries of divine domestic life had unfolded, with all its complexities of love, betrayal, political manoeuvring, and the quiet heroism of maintaining family stability despite impossible personal circumstances. The accumulated evidence from her day-long investigation painted a comprehensive picture of how individual romantic choices had evolved into systematic manipulation of cosmic administration, but the deeper significance lay in understanding how divine domestic relationships had shaped not only immortal society, but the entire framework of natural phenomena that governed mortal existence across the Mediterranean world. The private study where Hera retreated each evening to compile her daily observations and plan her responses to ongoing divine romantic crises had become, over the centuries, a repository of intelligence about the intersection between personal relationships and cosmic governance that revealed patterns of behaviour extending far beyond individual romantic scandals into the fundamental nature of power, authority, and responsibility in immortal society. The room itself reflected this dual purpose, with comfortable furnishings arranged to facilitate private contemplation, alongside filing systems that preserve detailed documentation of divine romantic activities and their effects on both family dynamics and cosmic administration. The evening ritual of organising and analysing the day's intelligence had evolved into a meditative practice that allowed Hera to process the emotional complexity of managing a marriage to an incorrigibly unfaithful husband, while simultaneously conducting sophisticated intelligence operations designed to protect both divine family stability and cosmic governance, integrity from the destabilizing effects of systematic romantic conspiracy. The careful arrangement of documents, the methodical review of evidence, and the strategic planning of future investigations provided structure for thoughts that might otherwise be overwhelmed by the magnitude of personal and political challenges involved in addressing divine domestic dysfunction. The documentation process itself had become a form of historical preservation, creating permanent records that would allow future generations of divine authorities to understand how romantic relationships among immortal beings had evolved from simple personal affairs into complex political conspiracies that affected the fundamental operation of cosmic governance systems. The systematic nature of this documentation reflected Hera's understanding that the current crisis represented not merely a personal marital problem, but a historical watershed that would influence the development of divine civilization for millennia to come. The analysis of romantic conspiracy patterns revealed that divine domestic relationships had always served political functions beyond simple personal satisfaction, with marriage alliances, family loyalties, and romantic entanglements creating the social framework within which cosmic governance decisions were made and implemented. The current escalation of romantic conspiracy into systematic manipulation of natural phenomena represented the logical evolution of these political dynamics, rather than a fundamental departure from historical patterns of divine relationship management. The systematic coordination between romantic operations and cosmic administration that Hera had documented throughout her investigation demonstrated how personal relationship choices by powerful immortal beings could create cascading effects that influenced everything from weather patterns to agricultural cycles to the social and economic development of mortal civilizations across vast geographic regions. The recognition of these connections required a fundamental reconceptualization of the relationship between divine domestic life and cosmic governance responsibility. The evening's reflection on the broader implications of divine romantic conspiracy led Hera to consider how similar patterns might operate within mortal societies, where political leaders' personal relationships, romantic entanglements, and family dynamics influenced governmental decisions that affected entire civilizations. The divine domestic experience provided a template for understanding how personal relationship management intersected with political authority across different scales of social organization. The technical sophistication that divine romantic operations had achieved through systematic coordination, strategic planning, and operational security indicated that immortal beings had developed advanced understanding of psychology, social dynamics, and organizational behavior that could be applied to legitimate governance functions if properly channeled. The same skills that enabled successful romantic conspiracy could potentially improve cosmic administration efficiency and effectiveness if redirected toward constructive purposes. The integration of romantic activities with official divine duties that characterized current divine behavior patterns suggested possibilities for reforming cosmic governance structures to accommodate personal relationship needs, while maintaining administrative integrity and effectiveness. The challenge lay in developing institutional frameworks that could harness the energy and creativity that immortal beings invested in romantic pursuits for constructive governance purposes, rather than allowing these forces to operate as parallel and potentially competing systems. The investigation into divine romantic conspiracy had revealed not only the scope and sophistication of current romantic operations, but also the fundamental vulnerability of cosmic governance systems to manipulation by individuals whose personal interests might conflict with broader governmental responsibilities. This vulnerability suggested that effective reform would require institutional changes that addressed both technical security issues and the underlying political dynamics that enabled romantic conspiracy to flourish within divine governmental structures. The coordination between multiple divine authorities in romantic operations demonstrated sophisticated understanding of collaborative planning and execution that indicated significant potential for applying these organizational capabilities to legitimate cosmic governance challenges. The systematic nature of romantic conspiracy indicated that divine authorities possessed advanced management skills that could be redirected toward constructive purposes through appropriate institutional reforms and incentive structures. The long-term historical development of divine romantic conspiracy from individual opportunistic affairs into systematic political manipulation indicated that current patterns represented the culmination of evolutionary processes that had been developing over centuries of divine civilization. Understanding these historical trends provided crucial context for developing reform strategies that addressed root causes rather than merely responding to current symptoms of systematic romantic conspiracy. The evening's analysis had revealed that divine domestic relationships served as the foundation for all other aspects of immortal society. With romantic entanglements, family loyalties, and marriage alliances creating the social networks through which cosmic governance decisions were made and implemented. The quality and integrity of divine domestic life therefore directly affected the effectiveness and legitimacy of cosmic administration across all domains of divine responsibility. The systematic documentation of divine romantic activities that Hera had maintained over centuries of managing marital crises had created an invaluable historical archive that preserved detailed information about the evolution of immortal social organization and its effects on cosmic governance systems. This archive would provide crucial resources for future divine authorities seeking to understand the relationship between personal relationship management and effective governance across different historical periods and social contexts. The investigation into current romantic conspiracy had demonstrated the importance of systematic intelligence gathering and analysis for understanding complex social and political phenomena that might otherwise remain hidden beneath surface appearances of routine administrative activity. The methodological approaches that Hera had developed for investigating divine romantic behaviour could be applied to other areas of cosmic governance that might benefit from enhanced transparency and accountability. The coordination of intelligence operations with routine administrative duties that characterized Hera's investigative methods demonstrated how existing governmental structures could be enhanced with additional analytical capabilities without requiring fundamental reorganization of cosmic administration systems. The integration of intelligence functions with normal administrative responsibilities provided models for institutional development that could improve governance effectiveness while maintaining operational continuity. As the evening deepened into night, and Hera completed her daily analysis of divine romantic conspiracy and its implications for cosmic governance, she reflected on the broader significance of domestic relationship management for the development of civilized society across both immortal and mortal populations. The patterns revealed through investigation of divine romantic behavior provided insights into fundamental aspects of social organization, political authority, and institutional development that transcended the specific circumstances of Olympian family dynamics. The quiet heroism of maintaining family stability despite impossible personal circumstances that characterized Hera's own experience represented a form of service to social order that extended far beyond individual relationship management to include preservation of institutional legitimacy and governmental effectiveness during periods of political crisis. The personal sacrifice involved in managing divine domestic dysfunction while maintaining public dignity and administrative competence demonstrated how individual character could influence broader social and political outcomes. The systematic nature of divine romantic conspiracy that Hera had documented indicated that addressing complex social and political problems required sustained commitment to intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and institutional reform that might extend across multiple generations of leadership. The patience and persistence required for this work represented virtues that were essential for effective governance regardless of the specific challenges being addressed. The integration of personal relationship management with professional governmental responsibilities that characterized divine domestic life provided models for understanding how individual character, family dynamics, and social relationships influence institutional effectiveness across different scales of political organization. The lessons learned from managing divine domestic dysfunction could inform approaches to governance challenges in other contexts and historical periods. The systematic approaches to relationship management, intelligence gathering, and institutional analysis that Hera developed during her centuries of navigating divine domestic complexity became foundational principles for understanding how personal relationships intersect with political authority and governmental effectiveness across all scales of social organisation. Her methodical documentation of romantic conspiracy patterns and their effects on cosmic governance created analytical frameworks that would influence approaches to political investigation and institutional reform throughout subsequent periods of divine civilization development. The archive of divine romantic intelligence that Hera maintained over millennia of managing marital crises became an invaluable resource for future generations of both divine and mortal authorities seeking to understand the complex relationships between personal character, family dynamics, social organisation, and governmental effectiveness. Her careful attention to detail and systematic analytical methods established standards for political intelligence work that would influence investigative techniques and institutional oversight procedures across multiple civilizations and historical periods. The integration of routine administrative duties with sophisticated intelligence operations that characterized Hera's investigative methods demonstrated how existing governmental structures could be enhanced with analytical capabilities that improve transparency, accountability, and effectiveness without requiring fundamental reorganization of established institutional frameworks. Her innovative approaches to combining domestic relationship management with cosmic governance responsibilities created models for institutional development that balance personal needs with professional obligations. The recognition that personal relationships among political leaders could systematically influence governmental decisions and policy outcomes that affected entire civilizations represented a fundamental contribution to political science that would influence approaches to governance analysis and institutional design throughout subsequent historical periods. Hera's documentation of how divine romantic behaviour shaped natural phenomena and cosmic administration revealed connections between personal character and public policy that had previously been overlooked or underestimated by political theorists and governmental reformers. The methodological innovations that Hera developed for investigating complex social and political phenomena established analytical frameworks that would be applied to understanding institutional corruption, governmental effectiveness, and political accountability across different cultural contexts and historical periods. Her systematic approaches to intelligence gathering, pattern analysis, and strategic planning became foundational elements of political investigation techniques that influenced both divine and mortal approaches to understanding power relationships and institutional behaviour. The institutional reforms that emerged from Hera's investigation into divine romantic conspiracy created precedents for addressing conflicts of interest, personal relationship management, and governmental integrity that would influence constitutional development and administrative law across multiple civilizations. Her work demonstrated how systematic analysis of political problems could lead to practical solutions that balanced individual rights with collective welfare, while maintaining institutional effectiveness and legitimacy. The process of investigating divine romantic conspiracy while managing the personal emotional challenges of marital infidelity transformed Hera from a reactive victim of domestic dysfunction into a sophisticated analyst of political behaviour, whose understanding of relationship dynamics provided unique insights into fundamental aspects of social organisation and governmental effectiveness. Her evolution from personal grievance to systematic investigation demonstrated how individual suffering could be channeled into constructive contributions to institutional development and social reform. The integration of personal experience with professional analytical work that characterized Hera's approach to divine domestic crisis management represented a form of character development that transcended individual circumstances to create broader understanding of how personal relationships influenced political outcomes across different scales of social organisation. Her transformation from private victim to public investigator demonstrated the potential for individual growth and learning even within the most challenging personal circumstances. The analytical frameworks and investigative methodologies that Hera developed during her management of divine domestic crisis continued to influence approaches to political investigation, institutional oversight, and governmental reform throughout subsequent periods of both divine and mortal civilization development. Her systematic approaches to understanding the relationship between personal character and public policy became foundational elements of political science that informed constitutional design, administrative law, and governmental accountability mechanisms across multiple cultures and historical periods. The recognition that personal relationships among political leaders could systematically influence governmental decisions and policy outcomes that affected entire civilizations represented a fundamental contribution to political science that would influence approaches to governance analysis and institutional design throughout subsequent historical periods. Hera's documentation of how divine romantic behaviour shaped natural phenomena and cosmic administration revealed connections between personal character and public policy that had previously been overlooked or underestimated by political theorists and governmental reformers. The methodological innovations that Hera developed for investigating complex social and political phenomena established analytical frameworks that would be applied to understanding institutional corruption, governmental effectiveness, and political accountability across different cultural contexts and historical periods. Her systematic approaches to intelligence gathering, pattern analysis, and strategic planning became foundational elements of political investigation techniques that influenced both divine and mortal approaches to understanding power relationships and institutional behaviour. The institutional reforms that emerged from Hera's investigation into divine romantic conspiracy created precedents for addressing conflicts of interest, personal relationship management, and governmental integrity that would influence constitutional development and administrative law across multiple civilizations. Her work demonstrated how systematic analysis of political problems could lead to practical solutions that balanced individual rights with collective welfare, while maintaining institutional effectiveness and legitimacy. The process of investigating divine romantic conspiracy while managing the personal emotional challenges of marital infidelity transformed Hera from a reactive victim of domestic dysfunction into a sophisticated analyst of political behaviour, whose understanding of relationship dynamics provided unique insights into fundamental aspects of social organisation and governmental effectiveness. Her evolution from personal grievance to systematic investigation demonstrated how individual suffering could be channeled into constructive contributions to institutional development and social reform. The integration of personal experience with professional analytical work that characterised Hera's approach to divine domestic crisis management represented a form of character development that transcended individual circumstances to create broader understanding of how personal relationships influenced political outcomes across different scales of social organisation. Her transformation from private victim to public investigator demonstrated the potential for individual growth and learning even within the most challenging personal circumstances. The analytical frameworks and investigative methodologies that Hera developed during her management of divine domestic crisis continued to influence approaches to political investigation, institutional oversight, and governmental reform throughout subsequent periods of both divine and mortal civilization development. Her systematic approaches to understanding the relationship between personal character and public policy became foundational elements of political science that informed constitutional design, administrative law, and governmental accountability mechanisms across multiple cultures and historical periods.